That's ridiculous.
Call our meeting to order. This is the Scott County Fiscal Court business meeting for August the 11th. Time is flying forward. School's about to start and a lot of good things going on here in Scott County. I would like to ask everyone to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Let us pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Ms. Hamilton, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Hostetler?
Here.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Mr. Wallace?
Here.
Mr. Corman?
Present.
Mr. Ellison? Mr. Pratt?
Here.
Mr. Livingston?
Here.
Mr. Culbertson?
Here.
Judge Covington?
Present. Thank you, Ms. Hamilton. Next item for consideration are our minutes and from our previous meeting. Any questions, comments related to those as presented?
Motion's approved.
We have a motion and we have a second. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next, number 5, transfers as presented. Questions, comments related to those? Motion from Mr. Corman.
Second.
Second from Mr. Wallace. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. You have bills and hand checks.
I need to add one handshake. Chris Runyon requested,
Okay.
so that he doesn't have to wait until the 24th.
Okay.
This total.
Yes. We have a hand check request from Mr. Chris Runyon with EMS. And it goes to Marcus Stevens, reimbursed paramedic class expense, EMTP. It's a total of $694.92. With that said, would there be any questions or comments related to that and the other bills and hand checks?
Motion.
We have a motion from Mr. Hostetler, a second from Mr. Livingston. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. We have the sheriff's fees.
Yes.
All right. All right. Let the record reflect that County Clerk Rebecca Johnson submitted fees in the amount of $93,286.73. Let the record reflect that Sheriff Tony Hampton submitted fees in the amount of $49,688.62. That moves us on to county real estate and personal property tax rates. Any discussion to add to our last, from our workshop, we discussed, in my mind, what is a decision that's fairly plain and black and white. Currently, we sit at 0.060, and if we reduce to 0.0570, we will have a real estate percent increase of 3.86, which keeps us below that 4% threshold, and we're still with our increased assessments or new assessments and then new growth, our revenue is still going to increase for this year. If you held the rate as I shared last time, we'd be looking at a 9.32% growth in revenue. If you even go at 0.0571, it goes over that 4.04 threshold. So my recommendation would be to consider the 0.0570 on real estate. On personal property, my recommendation would be to go to 3.91. I'm sorry, would go to 0.0531, which would give us 3.91% growth. Right now, we're sitting at 0.0567, and if you held that rate, you'd be at 10.95% growth. So that would be my recommendation, to go to that 0.0531. Of questions, comments to those two items?
Will you repeat the real estate one?
The real estate would be a recommendation of .0570. And then just for your, Michelle did a little bit of research for us, and the newest combined listing that we could find was from 2021. I'm sure there's one out there newer, but at .0570, we will be the fifth lowest property tax rate in the state of Kentucky. Just to give you a frame of reference, and you look at some of our neighbors, Boyle County 6.6, and this is going back to 21. Woodford County 7. You're looking at Fayette County at 8, and I think we're supplying the services with the amount of money that we have from different revenue streams, and I feel very confident right now that the recommendation of moving the rate to .0570 will still supply the funds that we need. And if you look as a reference across the state, we're down there in the bottom 5, which is, if you want to be at the bottom of something, tax rates are a good thing to be at the bottom of. So, questions or comments? Because I'm the only one talking.
Good job.
All right. Is that a motion then?
Motion.
I'll second
A
that.
second for Mr. Jones. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. That will move us to number 9. And Stacy, can you share that document with me? County motor vehicle and watercraft property tax rate. This one never changes. Let's see. All right. Tax rate for 2023 would be 16.6 cents per $100 of assessed value. That's what we need to have a motion on, and that's pretty black and white as well. Would there be a motion? Motion from Mr. Jones, second from Mr. Livingston. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. That will move us now to the Public Health Board tax rates. And that rate is .044 cents per 100. And really and truthfully, we just need a motion to acknowledge receipt of this tax rate.
And I need to note that Jared is in attendance because you have to have a representative.
Correct. Jared Holland is in attendance and would be our representative on that. Motion for Mr. Pratt. Second for Mr. Wallace.
And again,
Any other
Judge,
questions or comments?
this is just the acknowledging receipt.
That's all we can do. Yes, sir.
Right.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. So we have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. The extension district tax rates, and I and Michelle went, I'm a member of the extension board, and Michelle went with me, and we navigated through this process, explaining to the board about staying below that 4% rate, or you're hopeful to, if the monies are meeting the needs of the agency, which they are. So the recommendation there is moving that rate, and the district board voted on this rate, and we will have to approve this rate. But the proposed rate at the district board is .0167. That's going from .0176. That will hold growth at 3.88%. And then on personal property, the proposed rate is .0292, moving from .0312. This proposed rate will hold growth at 3.84%. And the motor vehicle being 1.6, as said, that doesn't change. So those rates are in line with staying below that 4% threshold as well. Would there be a motion or questions related to that?
Just clarify on that, on the sheet that we've got.
Yeah, it has like 1.6.
Is that per $100 value?
Yes.
Oh, 100.
Yes.
Yes, per 100.
It's really, it's really .0167.
We
but
were
it's-
we were working with
Yeah.
small numbers like $1.
Yeah.
So you're going to
Yeah.
100 and
But you are correct. So, that's a good question. We have a motion from Mr. Hostetler.
Second.
A second. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. We've taken care of those responsibilities, and I appreciate Michelle's efforts and everyone else's efforts on that. It's important to our community, and I think we're doing business in a physically responsible manner. And that leads us to number 12, ordinance 2309, first reading, RV campgrounds. Joe Kane is present. Joe, good to see you. Does anyone have any questions for Joe? Joe has shared, and I've shared, just summaries of the text amendment, any changes. Would anyone have any questions related to this matter?
Joe, I have a question about in the RV text. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong,
What section are you in?
that would be, so if you go and look at the Planning Commission text amendment, I'll have to find it. I was looking at it just a minute ago. The Planning Commission, or the planning staff recommended that there would be 2 entrances for every 200 RV spots or greater. And the Planning and Zoning Commission moved that to 400 spots, correctly?
Correct, yeah.
Can you maybe get into some of the justification of why the staff recommended 200 spots for 2 entrances into a proposed RV park?
Yeah, initially we used our existing subdivision regulations, which require a second entrance for 200 more single-family housing units. And that's for safety, emergency access, as well as just general traffic flow. And we went back and forth. The Planning Commission has a number of RVers on the board. And we did they asked us to look at other parks and see how other parks are handled. And it turns out that most parks have a main entrance to the park itself, and then they may have secondary entrances as well for emergency. Some have secondary, entrances for automobile, use of when leaving the park, just to get in the surrounding community, depending on where they were, if they're in more urban settings. So I think they came to the conclusion that most of these parks want to control their access. So they want the RVs coming in one place. They don't want them coming in multiple places. So one main entrance was sufficient. And, they thought that secondary entrances are needed, but they just landed on the 400 number based on them, 1, looking at other parks, but 2, there was some testimony from an RV developer that said the amount of traffic generated by these RV parks was not equal to subdivision developments. That people were coming in, they were staying there. They may leave infrequently to go do other things in the community, but the traffic was not at a level that it was in a subdivision. So they thought 400 was sufficient. So
based on an applicant that was in my district, when we looked at the proposed site, one of the issues that we had, and speaking with and John is more than welcome to speak with Chief Ward, with Chris, and with Sheriff Hampton, there was concerns about accessing that property in the case there was an emergency situation in case there was a safety risk issue of some sort, as well as fires and getting into fires. And so my concern with the way the text reads is that there's not multiple access points to any RV proposed areas in Scott County. And so I would say to the court that I think that's important. If we're going to allow our subdivisions to have multiple access points, I think we should have a commercial development also have multiple access points. And I feel strong, that's one issue that I feel strongly about, but I want to make sure that you justify it, and if any of the emergency folks want to speak to that, I am surmising what they had said when our conversation we had earlier.
John, would you like to comment on that? Or you had shared some specs about emergency access road with me, but that really doesn't fall, the specs don't really fall in this text amendment.
Right. And like Magistrate Wallace said, if something were to happen in one of these RV parks, we need to have that proper access to get to wherever, because if it's one entry and that entry's clogged up with, like, say, campers stacked up ready to get through there, it could create a delay in response for our guys.
The other issue that we had, and this is based on an application by a previous development, that there's no applicants currently and correct me if I'm wrong, there's no application.
Correct.
But the Scott County Fire, EMS, Sheriff's Office would have to go into Woodford County and then come back into Scott County. And so by having two access points, then that would eliminate that. As far as going forward.
And with that,
But clarify, and I completely understand your concern, and it would be my concern as well. But the text amendment, when the development plan comes to the commission, that's when that specific site issues can be navigated. On this text amendment, I don't think we need to get into those weeds.
Well, but the text is going to guide what happens with the development plans.
Well,
Yeah, and the problem is if you don't define, you leave it subject to interpretation. And Rob, you know that you could go from one planning commission to the next and have totally different interpretations of what.
But this has, if it's 400 or more RV sites, then it should have 2 public accesses. If it's 600 or more, it should have 3 public accesses. And then that's not even talking about the emergency access. There's also a line for emergency access as well.
But if we're requiring our subdivisions to have if they have 200 houses in a subdivision, why would we not do the same thing for an RV park?
The thing I see with the RV parks is you have a lot of long-term rentals there, monthly rentals and stuff. And you start building those up, how many are we going to allow to
That's a fair consideration. I think what Joe mentioned was that the feeling was that the traffic, and from looking at other RV parks, that the traffic did not equal a subdivision traffic. And I'm not a professional planner. I don't have the data in front of me. I'm trusting Joe and the commission. But if this body wants to talk, we're here to talk. That's why we're here.
So here's another thing I would consider. Is there any regulations, Joe, as far as how wide the roads have to be inside of an RV park? Do we specify that in our application?
Yeah, the roads would have to meet minimum county standards, so 20 foot of pavement, 2 foot shoulders.
Okay. So that helps
Inside
with
the
the
park.
emergency vehicles getting through in case it's jammed up supposedly, right?
We're about 10 feet wide, time you count mirrors and everything for the apparatus.
But if we're with county regulations, that should make the roads wide enough inside of RV park, which is good in my book. But I still feel like the 200 is more in line than the 400. I agree with Mr. Wallace on that.
Judge, so
Mr. Hostetler.
a couple of things have been said. I'm trying to put them together. somebody mentioned long-term rentals. I've got a friend that owns an RV park, and I'm not sure if they're in Woodford or I can't remember what county they're in, but there's something about, he's told me that there's something about they're not allowed to do, there's a term that they can do, but it's not a lengthy term that they can rent for. Is that not the case here? Or what, is there any guidelines about how long somebody can stay at an RV park? I don't know.
There's nothing in the zoning. There might be something in the building code that you're only allowed, they're not considered permanent residences. So I think there might be a 6-month limitation, but I'd have to double check on that, but.
Because it kind of
There's
goes back
nothing
to
in-
what you said, that the commission thought that because it's not like a subdivision of 200 homes where people are getting up, going to work, going shopping, coming back home, that constant coming and going. An RV park, I would think, would be a little different, for sure. Most of the time, folks are they're going out, they go out for the day. Otherwise, they're hanging out there at their camper or at their campsite or whatever.
Yeah, I mean.
Kind of trying to wrap my head around the 200 versus 400, because I kind of agree, 200 sounds like quite a few folks can be there, and the RV park that's in the district that I have the privilege to serve stays pretty full. I don't think they've got 200 campsites, but they're close.
Yeah, they're.
And they've got one way in and out that I'm aware of, which,
With
Jones?
with emergency entrances like we did up there off of McClellan, next to that retirement home. Remember, we had put those bollards or something?
Yeah.
Would that suffice, as getting an emergency entrance and to a backside, and that keeps people from running in and out with their vehicles, but at least emergency vehicles could get through if there was something.
So are you
wrong.
proposing anything over 200 required emergency access?
I think so. That's my personal opinion.
And then when you get to 400, then you'd have to have that secondary point of access. Is that
open
what-
to the public.
I don't want to speak for you, I'm just trying
That
to.
sounds good to me, yes. That's
Mr.
what you
Wallace,
just
what's
said.
your thoughts?
I still don't, I was part of that, and that was a mistake that the city council made years ago. They should have had access from Mount Vernon to get in. Now, there's multiple accesses in the Mount Vernon subdivision, but there was, the reason why that was put in place is because one homeowner came and complained that there was going to be too much traffic in front of the property. I think that from access to get to the hospital, and the hospital's close, don't get me wrong, but that was.
Yeah.
I was just
But-
pointing
but-
that one
But
out
what
as an
we're saying
example
though
is,
is,
could
or
we
what's
use
being
that here?
mentioned is, at 200, you have to have an emergency access, secondary emergency access.
The other thing that you have, Judge, we're not thinking about is sometimes theoretically, if there's RVs and they're all coming in at a certain time, they could be backed up onto public streets. And so if you have multiple accesses, you eliminate that from happening.
But I go back to what I go back to is like the site development plan will have to address that. And they might have an entrance that queues up a half mile in. I don't know. But
They could have 200 feet off the road too.
But hopefully the planning commission would not allow that to happen. But if you want to make an amendment to this document.
Well, and that's what
Just
I'm going to do.
To clarify how it's actually written now, it says a second entrance is needed at 400, but that can be, the secondary entrances can be emergency access only, so they could be gated. So you need one at 400, it can be gated. So if you did make a change, I would just say go to 200, and that could be gated as well. I mean, it can be
That's what
open,
I
but
was
it can be
kind of thinking.
gated.
What Mr. Jones was saying was at 200, you have to have an emergency access entrance that can be gated. And John shared some specs, it'd have to have a what's the name? A Knox lock on it that's only, accessible by fire department, sheriff's office and such.
My whole point would be is that I think the way the ordinance reads is to have two public connections or accesses at 200 RV sites. that could be determined, like what you're saying, whether it's an emergency access point or if it's just a regular.
What
access
section are you in, Chad?
point. So that is in section section 2.51, subsection O in the ordinance.
Like the third page of it, Rick.
Yeah, that's correct.
Right here.
Is there, looking through this, is there any thing to do with the amendment? I know it addresses internal roads and it addresses connection to an arterial road, maybe like a US 25 or whatever, but is there, I didn't notice anything in here that addresses the width of the entrance coming into or anything like that, because you can't just have a 20-foot road as an entrance, because if somebody's hauling in a 40-foot fifth wheel, then you're going to have problems. And then you start, I mean, because if you think about it, there's 400 sites. If just 5% move out on a daily basis, that's 20, or come in on a daily basis, that's 20. And the chances of getting backed up with 5 or 6 campers is pretty high. And if you're talking 30 and 40-foot campers, then they're going to be blocking that main road pretty significantly at probably a 15-minute spot to get checked in. And so you're talking about a long time span of when they would, how long it would take them to check in and clear that road. So is there anything in here also on how far offset from the arterial road that the check-in point has to be, or a camp store, so that they can get into and pull off there to check in and then go on to their campsite? Because that's how most of the state parks are. They don't have the check-in right at the entrance. But if you don't specify that in here, you're never going to know whether it's going to be set back, you know, a tenth of a mile, or if it's going to be right on the road that you have to check in, which would be a disaster.
Would you like to comment?
Yeah, I mean, we just left that as part of the preliminary, the development plan review, you know, for the individual
But see,
site.
what I'm afraid of is nobody thinks of that. If you're not,
Well,
if you're not a person that's camped
yeah.
all your life, you're not going to think about those things of going in and out, because it's not something you've ever done.
Yeah, and it probably varies on the size of the site. I mean, if it's a 600 site, you know, RV park, you probably need a longer entrance and
Right.
exit. But yeah, so we didn't address that because we didn't think, you know, at this time, these are the kind of the big picture items that we
Yeah.
deal with, and that would come at the development plan when they have a professional designer doing it. But it's,
But when they do their development plan, they're trying to save money on development costs. So if we don't catch it in planning, or if you all don't catch it in planning and zoning, then it's a moot point at that time.
yeah, I mean, they discussed that, but we didn't come up with any standard. I mean, they just were aware that these RV parks have pull-offs and check-ins, and they're going to have to be off the public street and off the, you know, the internal drives to do that. So, yeah, there's no standard in here.
I have a concern along those lines of dealing with the site development and the planning commission. Sounds like Camper David over here. I've camped quite a bit growing up, but it sounds like he's professional. My concern is really the fence. I know that's an ordinance we passed, but I've never been to a campground that is totally encapsulated by a fence. That sounds more like a parking lot than a campground. Is that something we could leave up to the planning commission to say, hey, if a fence is needed, put one up? But this makes it sound like they have to have one, and maybe it's not needed. And that doesn't lend itself to camping. It's more.
Yeah, I mean, that is something that a variance could always be requested for. And, you know, this is more a fence at the boundary with ag property, ag use property.
I mean,
So
anywhere a
it's,
campground's going to be surrounded by ag in the county.
yeah, I guess the specific site I'm thinking about, you know, has a creek running through it, so it wouldn't be at the boundary. The creek wouldn't be, because there's a barrier there, and it's internal to the site. But yeah, I mean, potentially they would be required to fence the perimeter completely around. So if it didn't make sense, that's always a variance that can be requested. But it's there to protect active agricultural land from trespassing and from, you know, people hiking and trespassing on the ag land. So if there was no ag land, if it was just forested, we've allowed variances before for those fences, for buffer fences.
So, listening to David, listening to Mr. Wallace and Mr. Jones and everyone, do you want to put in a stipulation in the text amendment that requires X feet off the main arterial road for, for the check-in point for the campground? Is that what you're saying?
I think it makes sense,
Yeah.
but I don't know what the limit.
But I don't think
Or
it needs to be X feet.
just
If
say-
you've got 200, it could be a lesser, because you're probably going to have less traffic in and out. But if you go to 400, then, and if you're going ahead and say that you're typically going to need 60 feet per unit,
What if their entrance is sideways? Like we've been in camera, like you don't go straight in, there's plenty of places to pull off, but you're not 20 feet from the road. But there's plenty of, once you get into the campground.
well, I think that would be if they could request a variance if they showed that they have the proper parking to not back up onto the road.
Any other comments down here or questions?
I think I might have misunderstood you, but you're talking about the entrance from the arterial road being 20 feet wide, and it says with a 3-foot shoulder. Is that 3 feet on each side?
Yeah.
Okay, because I wasn't sure if that was total, like 18 inches on each side or something. So that's
3
3
feet
foot
total.
on
3
each
feet
side.
on each side, yeah.
So you'd have 26 feet of drivable
Yeah. Well, yeah.
total,
Yes.
26 feet wide.
If there's,
Yeah, Judge, this is what I'd like to do. I'd like to make a motion to deal with certain things in this ordinance, then we can vote on certain aspects of it and then approve it going forward. So I would make a motion.
can I,
Yeah.
before you make a motion, is there any comment from the public? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Judge. My name's Dick Murphy. I'm a lawyer for Anderson Communities. Dennis Anderson is here, along with John Strom from Anderson Communities. I'm speaking because I went through the process at the Planning Commission as they came up with this text amendment. As you all may recall, it was discussed at least 3 different Planning Commission meetings. It was delayed a couple times so they could get some additional information about the very topics that you all are talking about. They went into a lot of depth about it, as Mr. Kane mentioned to you. I think there were 4 members of the Planning Commission who were RVers themselves, so they had a lot of experience in various parks. And they also got the experience of Roy Cornett, who you all probably know. His family operates some RV parks in Florida, and he had pointed out that he had, I can't remember the number of units, 800 or 1,000 units at his RV park using one entrance. And he felt that a lower number was not needed. So they looked into that and did some studying on it and came up with the 400 number. And here's how we had sort of come up with the 400 number ourselves. And that is based upon traffic. Your regulations do require for a single-family detached neighborhood that above 200 units, you have to have a second entrance. We looked at the trip generation on that. We know at a single-family unit, people running back and forth, taking kids to soccer and going to work and going to lunch and all that sort of thing. But we looked at the Institute of Traffic Engineers trip generation information. And in the peak hour at a single-family detached home, there's basically 1 trip per house. It's 0.99, but basically 1 trip per house during that peak hour, which would be about 200 trips. But then we looked at the Institute of Traffic Engineers numbers for a RV campsite, and it's 0.27. It's almost 1/4 the trip generation for an RV campsite as it is for a single-family house. if we just used the proportional figures, we'd done the calculation, and 200 single-family homes has the same trip generation as 733 RV campsites, 733. We thought that was a little high, so we had suggested 400 at that point. And the Planning Commission discussed that and thought that was a reasonable number too, based upon the experience of a lot of the RV park owners there. It's that fact that RVs are mobile. You know, if there's an issue, they're on wheels. They can move, whereas obviously houses can't. And RV parks usually aren't 100% occupied. Now, the one Anderson Communities has an interest in is more of a resort park with not having long-term people there. It's probably more of a weekly type thing or 2 weeks perhaps, rather than a long-term residence. We don't want long-term residents in those. We talked about the fact also that the issue about the entranceway. There's a number of ways to address that. RV parks want to have everybody check in at one place usually, and the options would be having a long road going in so you can stack a lot of RVs going in, or a real wide entrance point where people can pull off the highway and wait to be able to check in as well. And looking at those two options, I think they felt that they put some minimum standards here, but felt that that could be dealt with in the development plan that would have to be filed. As you all know, this ordinance requires a zone change for any RV park to come up. So that means that it has to go back to the Planning Commission, has to come to you, then we have to have a development plan along with that where you address all these particular issues. I hope I know we need minimum requirements here, but at the same time, every RV park's different, every piece of land, the topography's different as well. So that's why I think the staff would recommend a zone change, so you get a development plan on everything, and you come and look at that and talk over all these issues on that. So, and I think Anderson Communities had checked with Chief Ward, who had indicated the 400 number was okay. But anyway, I just wanted to tell you what our thought process was, and also going through 3 separate meetings with the Planning Commission. They did a pretty in-depth review of this with a lot of experience on it. So thank you very much. Just wanted to pass that on to you.
Yeah, I was going to say real quick, I understand that it has to come to us for the zone change, but the development plan is moot because that is not supposed to have any bearing on what we do as a court on the zone change. It's been explained to me in the past, because I don't like that. I would rather our vote to be able to be on considering the development plan, but what I've been told in the past is that as long as it meets minimum requirements, we either have to vote it up or down. And without taking into consideration the actual development plan and how it looks and what we think about and how it fits in that area. So as long as planning and zoning says it meets minimum requirements, we can't consider the development plan itself. Is that correct, Joe?
Well, you're not.
That's what I've been told
you're
before
not
sitting up here.
Approving the development plan. The Planning Commission is the ultimate approver of the development
Correct.
plan.
But if we
you can
vote down based on the development plan, then we're basically voting for or against the development plan, not whether it meets specific requirements.
Well, I'm not an attorney, but I would say that you can consider the development plan in considering whether it's appropriate, the zone is appropriate for the area, because if the development plan shows that it's not compatible with what's around it, and the zone is not going to be able to, they're not going to develop, in a way that makes the zone change appropriate, then I think you can consider the development plan, but you're not approving the development plan. It's just kind of an image concept of what the development will be, and it can change after the zone change.
That's the concern too, because it never comes back.
And your desire would be to have editorial rights to that document. Is that what you're?
No, because I mean, we can't do everything.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why we have planning and zoning. And if it doesn't meet or is not a good fit, I would assume that planning and zoning, it wouldn't even make it to us to begin with.
Mr. Murphy, real quickly, you referenced the amount of trips. What was your reference? What research did you reference?
That was based on the Institute of Traffic Engineers
Okay.
Standard manuals.
Okay.
And that's good information about the RV park volume as compared to residential development.
And I'd like to make a comment.
Oh, absolutely. Mr.
Well,
Foreman.
I've had 2 clients I've done home loans for in the last year that bought homes that had previously lived in an RV for the last year and a half. And we do have a housing shortage, and I just wonder sometimes if, and we don't know what the future holds, but if this does become down the road more of a permanent residence type situation, we may not be planning for that right now, but that may just happen. And if that's the case, then I would say if we're going to have 200 lots, then we probably have 2 entrances. Unless we want to put a time limit on the amount of time that people can park there. We say they've got to be there and out in 30 days, or I don't know what would be typical, then I would be okay with that. But I'm afraid it would be bad planning in the future if half of those turn into permanent residences somehow.
I think with the time frame, then you put it back on somebody else to enforce it. And the park owner may not enforce it. So then you have to go to another enforcement agency.
As long as they got enforced,
Yeah,
I wouldn't want people living there and it become a neighborhood.
yeah.
Yeah. On your comment, the 200 threshold, would a emergency access only at 200, would that satisfy your concern?
I like that just in general, but if there's not a time limit that they can be parked there, then I would be in favor of 2 entrances right now.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
Back down here, anyone else? Mr. Wallace was going to make a motion. If there's no other comments, then I'll turn it over to Mr. Wallace.
One question, this is really, I guess, maybe for Mr. Kane. I do, just for my education, so a park like this, where the majority of it's in another county, and then we have a small part, so we would basically then be approving only the area that's in our county, right?
Correct. Yeah. We have no.
So if there was 150 RV spots in another part of the county and only 50 in this part of the county, we would then only, even though there's 200 spots total, we would only require 1 entrance, is that right?
That's a good question.
And then,
yeah.
And then what if they had 2 entrances in another county and they had 300 spots, but we only had 50 spots in here? Are we still requiring an entrance in our county or not? Like, I just don't know.
I mean, the way I would interpret it, I'd look at the whole park for the number of entrances, whether they be
Whether
in
it's straddled another county.
Yeah, no matter what county they're in, the
So
entrances
if
are
they had 2
in.
entrances in another county and they had 400 spots, but none in Scott County, that would be fine as well?
That's how I would interpret it. I would look at the park as a whole. I mean, if it straddled the county line, but we have no jurisdiction outside the county, so I couldn't, make them do anything in Woodford County or any other county. But yeah, I would, if they had 150 in Woodford County and 51 in Scott County and only 1 entrance, I think they would need to provide another entrance if we use the 200 number or whenever they went over the threshold. That's how I would interpret it. It might be challenged, and then it would, if it was challenged, then I guess the courts would make that determination.
Now, Mr. Wallace, you had mentioned wanting to make a motion. Would it be good with you to read the summary as is, and then you make a motion to amend with what you want? Tell me what's on your mind.
Well, the other thing is, that's why I wanted to look at these issues separately, because the other issue that I have has to do with sewer. And the 2 current, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, we have 1 current RV park in Scott County. We have 1 that was originally proposed on Connector Road, but that's no longer in the mix. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So we just have one in Scott County.
Yeah. So under the RV park we have on Rogers Gap Road, they currently are served by sewer. And yeah, it is my opinion that moving forward, that we should have a sewer that is provided for this type of density as well as this type of development. And part of the issue is that David, Kelly, myself, and Rick have budgeted money from the taxpayers to address an issue down on the trailer park on Lyle Road in US 25 South, and I do not want to put taxpayers of Scott County back in that position where we are having to run sewer to address an issue in the future. I'm not saying there's new technologies out there that can be addressed, but the one thing that's been tried and true that we've used has been the sewer system. And I believe that it's important that we attach sewer to any type of RV development in Scott County. That was the second issue that I had.
So are you saying they need to tie it to Georgetown Water?
I didn't say had to tie into.
Or could it be a separate?
It could be a sewer system from a different group. And we have that. We have Dill Plain Disposal, we have Bluegrass Water, we've got Mallard Point, but it could be something along those lines.
What's allowed right now? Like, what would this change? I don't, like, if I built an RV park today, what sewage options would I have today? I don't know that.
Well, I don't believe we specifically say that they couldn't use an alternative system. We just don't allow package treatment plants. We have allowed, combined septic in cluster subdivisions. But right now, I mean, it's only feasible really on sewer because you can't get nobody's tried or explored, as far as I know, alternative on-site systems other than package treatment plants. So right now, it's not really spelled out in our ordinance. So it's a conditional use permit for RV parks in A1. Anything urban densities, we make them go on sewer because, you need a minimum lot size for on-site septic. But if the health department approved an alternative system that wasn't a package treatment plant, I think the health department could feasibly approve it. We don't regulate at the Planning Commission septic systems, but our practice is anything outside the urban service boundary is not on sewer. Sewer can't be extended outside the urban service boundaries. So it's either some type of on-site system. The RV park that's out there that we do have is unusual in that I think it tapped into the line that was extended to Sadieville, but that wasn't intended for development outside the county, but they just happened to be right at the edge of the urban service and they could tap into it. But
along those lines, to your question, the site development plan application would be reviewed and then a proposal made by the developer. If sewer service was not available, they would have to make some type of development plan proposal that would be reviewed. And then the health department would review that and essentially give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And then it goes to where? Back to the Planning Commission.
Right. Well, the Planning Commission, we try not to, in the past, try not to put too much pressure on the health department to approve untested systems. Or go through the Planning Commission, approve something contingent upon the health department, and then all the pressure's on the health department to find a way to allow this to happen. So there's been a policy not to, allow urban uses and sewer outside the urban service boundaries. So in general practice, Planning Commission probably would not approve an urban style density development out in the county unless the health department was on board ahead of time. So, this system, they made a presentation to the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission felt comfortable enough that this was tested in Kentucky. And and was feasible, without having to install a package treatment plant out there. So,
But
I don't know.
this body can address that right now. We don't have to wait on the health department. We can address it, say you have to hook the sewer, and something that we currently do.
The planning commission and health department don't have to pay for running sewer lines out of it. So, I don't want them deciding something that impacts this fiscal court later down the road for us to have to spend millions to get a sewer line somewhere and take care of a problem that was there that we could have addressed at the development stage.
So back to the original point, Judge, that's why I wanted to look at two different motions to look at addressing each one. But if you want to read the summary first, then we can address it afterwards.
No, if you want to discuss what you want to propose, and then we can go from there.
So I would make the motion that,
You can't. I'd ask, like, if you're making a motion
for an amendment,
but
you would rather, would you rather read it and then?
I'd rather read it.
And then amend it?
right.
But hold on a
If
second.
we read it and we do something different at the second reading, that's a major change,
Yeah.
which has to go back to a first reading.
Yes, it's substantial, so you
So-
can't do that.
So we might as well sit on it.
Table it.
Make our decisions.
Yeah.
And then bring it back for a first
But
reading.
I would like.
Is there a big hurry in this? I feel like it's being rushed.
Well,
Hasn't been rushed.
it hadn't been rushed.
No, I mean,
But,
that's
yeah.
concerns this morning that
Judge, I mean, I can make a motion to table it and we can,
Well,
the
but
court digest all this.
I would like to hear from you what your concerns are without you framing it in a motion.
Okay, so I thought I had laid that out, but I'm gonna lay it out again. I believe that there should be 200 RV sites with 2 public road connections, accesses, so that would change section 2.51, subsection O, from 400 to 200, and then a requirement that all RV parks be on a local, or sorry, I guess that would be technically municipal sewer system.
What section is there?
That section, that's subsection M. And the problem with private systems are you're depending on private people to take care of it. And that's what happened with Lyle Road. We depended on private people to maintain a private system, and it did not work.
There were 2 other things discussed, and I guess I would like to know if you want that in there too, which is one of them is that RV campgrounds with more than 200 RV sites shall have a secondary emergency access entrance. Is that something you want in there?
That's O.
Yeah.
Well, if Mr. Wallace's desire, that would eliminate that, I think.
Okay. And then the second thing that we discussed was like pull-in entrance specifications. You didn't mention anything about that. Do we want to,
If
want
somebody
text
else
about
wanted
that?
to make that, I mean, that's a concern, but if somebody
Yeah.
wanted to change that.
So we
Yeah,
can,
I understand
the 3 of us can meet.
I just
during-
turned 54, but my memory's not gone
So
yet.
I don't know how to adequately, because I don't have the data to make a recommendation about what an adequate distance would be for 200 campsites, 400 campsites, 600 campsites. I don't know. So would there be interest in tabling this, and then we can come back? Matter of fact, I'll make a motion to table this.
I'll second that.
Also,
We have a motion and we have a second. Now, questions or comments?
Does the city also have to do that?
No, because it's the A1R zone, which doesn't apply to the city. Yeah, these are also allowed in the B2 highway commercial zone, where they would go in the city.
Any other questions or comments?
So,
We have-
Pam, if
So,
if
it
it's
sounds like,
amended, we'll have another first reading.
yeah, it sounds like me and Chad need to just sit down next week and make some amendments and bring it back.
And I would
next meeting.
include staff.
And whoever else needs to be involved, yeah, Joe
Yes.
and David, if you want to be involved, or whoever else.
So back to question?
Well, not a question, but a comment going along with what Cam's talking about is, if you're going to sit down and try to hash some things out, which I'm in favor of. But I thought the attorney, and I apologize, I've forgotten his name, made some good points about Mr. Murphy, I'm sorry. I thought he made some good points about the traffic flow that needs to be really considered, because that's a big difference from what a subdivision, as I stated before. It's obvious they're going to come and go, and you said that's about one
quarter.
The RV park is 1/4 of what a subdivision of the same size would do. Got it. So I think that's got to be considered, and that would also be considered heavily, because Mr. Pratt brought up something that, you don't have to come straight in if you can, and all that's part of the development plan, and that entrance into there. And the other point that Mr. Murphy made was, in an emergency situation, all the vehicles that we're talking about are mobile. I mean, I've been in major intersections just recently in Lexington when the fire department was making a run, and everybody locked up in the intersection because here comes the bells and whistles, and the fire department's going, somebody got to get out of the way, and nobody wants to move, but they can, and they did, and that's the same thing we're talking about there. That's it, Judge.
Thank you. So we have a motion, we have a second. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. We'll table and ask Cam to get with those parties to craft some additional language. We will move now to number 13, EMS new hire promotion. Jeff Mudrack.
Morning, everyone. Yes, I'm pleased to recommend several new hires and promotions to you. And first of all, in EMS, the recommendation of Alex Thomas. He has obtained his paramedic certification. He'll be moving from EMT to the paramedic position. His new pay rate will be $16.58 an hour. And since he obtained that certification last week, we'd like to make that effective at the start of this pay period, which is August the 5th. In addition to that, we're also recommending the appointment of Jersey Hamilton as a part-time high school co-op student at $8.50 an hour. So there's that recommendation.
Is there anyone else that could speak to the qualifications of Jersey Hamilton?
I don't know if we can or not, but I heard she comes highly recommended.
No, interested in a career in healthcare.
So, Judge, I would like to make a comment on it, because I did ask Stacy if that was the same Jersey Hamilton that I knew, and she said it was. But I think she's part of the co-op program with ECS, which is a tremendous program. And I just wanted to make that comment. So good for her, and it'd be a plus for her, and I'm thinking it'll be a plus for EMS.
Is that a motion?
Yes, sir.
Is there a second? Second for Mr. Livingston. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Jeff Mudrack will stay right there for a couple more.
That's right.
Road Department new hire.
Next is Road Department. On behalf of J.R. Brandenburg, I'm pleased to recommend two new hires in the Road Department. One is Corey Swatzler at $19.31 an hour. He'll start on or after August 14th, which is this coming Monday. In addition to that, we have Chris O'Brien at $17.87 an hour, and he'll begin employment definitely on August the 14th.
Where does that get our road department?
We're still too short. Yeah.
Winter is coming.
That's Ridley's question.
Yeah.
No, I beat Mr.
Stole his
Hostel.
thunder.
So I know y'all been working hard, interviewing people, and I appreciate it. Motion for Mr. Hostetler, second for Mr. Jones. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. County Attorney, Mr.
Yes,
Mudrack,
next.
Mr. Culbertson.
Yes. On Cam's behalf, we conducted interviews of several candidates for this position, and recommending Erica Hayden as the new child support caseworker at $25.31 an hour, and she will also begin employment on August the 14th.
Questions, comments? Motion for Mr. Hostetler, second for Mr. Jones. Any other questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Then Mr. Ward and Mr. Mudrack with the fire department promotion.
Yeah, we have one promotion in the fire department. This list was presented to the court last September. Ed House is being promoted from firefighter to lieutenant effective August the 19th, which is the start of the next pay period. His new pay rate will be $18.09 an hour. and the lieutenant spot's vacated because of Fabian Shields' retirement. So,
Questions, comments? Motion from Mr. Livingston, second from Mr. Wallace. Any other questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
thank you.
That brings us to Parks Agreement renewal. But before we enter into any conversation there, I had a phone call and returned trying to connect, but there was a request to address the court. Ashley, is that you? Is it related to the Parks Agreement, your request to address the court?
I don't know exactly what is in the Parks Agreement.
It's a field usage agreement, and it's the same one that's in place, just being renewed. But if
From our brief conversation, it sounded like it is
yeah,
related.
so if you would like to address the court, certainly always want to give our community opportunity to address the court. If you'd like to do that now, be happy to.
Sure. Actually, Sam Jones, our vice president, is in today.
I know that guy by chance as well.
Good morning. I am Sam Jones. I'm the interim vice president for Scott County Softball League. We are having a big issue right now trying to use fields. We have 4 at Marshall Park between travel ball, Special Olympics, plus the league. It's getting crowded. We're having trouble getting contact for Great Crossings. We're trying to get a better understanding on how to get there, how to use it. My understanding is 7 days in a week, Parks gets 2 days. Is that right?
That's not correct.
Okay.
Parks has been playing all spring long, both Sky County Youth Baseball, Sky County Youth Softball. Had 2 nights of practice that they had shared, and then playing games on Saturdays. And then there's a lottery, my understanding, for summer ball teams that but Sam, we want our community to use it, and we've changed our policy from what was. We were trying to keep it from getting worn down to where we've tried to add usage, and we're in the process of looking at where can we add fields, and what as a big community, what are the community capital needs for Parks and Rec? And one of those considerations is, do we need to add youth baseball and softball fields, like an additional clover leaf that would be usable for our youth teams?
Absolutely.
So, I'm happy to try to connect you with Tim Tevis or Kim Rice, and right now, are you talking about usage like for the fall?
Well, fall's the big thing.
Yeah.
We're down to every team is scheduled 1 day a week because we have so many teams. That's all we can do for practice, and then there's no telling how that's going to change per games. Mm-hmm. And not being able to actually see a schedule for Great Crossings, to where we can try and jump in there on an opening day, whether the league has to rent it or not. Whichever, but having that ability would help us a lot.
Can I, Mr. Jones? My kids have played. I've got 3 daughters, and they've played. They started in league probably 17 years ago. My oldest did. So all 3 of mine went through league. So I feel your pain, because for the last 15 years I had gone to Parks and Rec and argued about use of fields and equity of the number of fields, softball versus baseball.
Absolutely.
And I argued till I was blue in the face, and that was one of the reasons why Great Crossing was constructed in the manner that it was, and there are no 300-foot fences out there, because those are not the size fields we need, and so we built that they could be used for Little League and softball and have portable mounds and all that out there.
Yeah.
The judge is he's right. We're trying to figure out a way to build those other 4 fields, but I also feel your pain in scheduling fields. I just tried to schedule one last week.
Yeah.
For a tryout for one of my daughter's teams, and I've never dealt with. It was like doing my taxes online or something like that. You just don't do it.
Yeah.
The system is bad. It needs to be replaced.
But you're talking about the system through Parks and Rec.
Correct, yes. And I don't know who is in charge of what at this point in time, because I was actually told that Scott County Softball Club was in charge of renting the Marshall fields, and they were keeping all the money. Well,
Now, we do rent the Marshall Fields. There is an agreement between us and Parks that we are able to do that during our seasons. And that is all done through actually my wife. She writes up the MOUs and does all that schedule.
but see, that's the thing, is it needs to be a little more streamlined, because I wouldn't know to call you to rent a field at Marshall.
Yeah.
And so it's a whole process that needs to be looked at. Now, I am not in favor of turning over Great Crossing Park to anyone else other than Tim Tevis or whoever works out there at the time under the supervision of Fiscal Court.
So what I would propose, and I would agree with you, is allow me to get with Kim and you, and then we probably also need to include youth baseball.
And Tim Tevis.
And Tim.
Talk about what the usage is out at Great Crossing.
And that way everybody's on
Well,
one page.
Our usage is 1 day a week for 2 fields. That is what we are allotted as Scott County Softball Club.
Well, and I think the reason that is because for the past 2.5 years, Scott, until you all have come in as a board, Scott County Softball Club has said, we don't need them. So then the usage, the other usage was probably taken away, if I remember correctly. But if you're saying you need them, then the softball club and baseball are priority out there during the week. And so we need to go back and address that and adjust that schedule at the correct time.
Yeah, could Tim also just send us the schedule for the whole year?
Well, and then that's the other thing. We have to schedule everything for out there. You know, I believe it's come November 1st is when Tim is going to start opening the schedule up and get everything ready for the following year. You know, we're playing league ball. It's kind of hard to schedule that a year out.
Well, but I don't think you have to schedule your games. You just say these are the days we need it.
It'll be like Monday and Wednesday.
Host a tournament or?
Well, Monday and Wednesday in the spring will be practice nights that'll split, 2 fields from 5 to 9 or whatever. And then games on Saturdays and 2 fields split likewise. That's what my understanding was going on this spring. Was that not the case?
Now, we do have 2 fields 1 day a week. That is what we have.
Not 2 fields 2 days a week in the spring?
We have 2 fields 1 day a week.
I think that goes back to what I said earlier.
They
is
turned
that
them
the
back.
prior board
Then-
said we
then-
don't need them.
Then that may be the
But
case.
what was my comment was that it has to be, if you give 2 fields to to baseball, you need to give 2 fields baseball.
Yeah.
Or softball, baseball, whatever. But and then they do try to get early, like if you have requests for summer tournaments, he's trying to do scheduling. But let me get your number, and I'll get Kim to sit down and Tim sit down, and then try to get everybody on one page. But we are trying to look at the big picture of capital needs, and one of those things is 4 more fields that would be available for practice and games.
Well, I know it'd be greatly appreciated. I know the league is doing a lot to change, where it was and changing where it's going.
And the whole board of the softball group changed over here recently. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. But be happy to try to work with you.
Thank you.
Can I ask a real quick question? Do you have any update on the dugouts at Marshall?
That's what I was going to
I
mention.
know it's not your position to get them repaired. I'm wondering if you have any update on those.
We did attend last month's meeting with Great Crossing. We were told that they were looking for quotes. That's as far as we've gotten so far. We do plan on attending the next meeting to follow up again.
You're talking about parks. You meant
Parks
the
and
parks
Rec.
meeting.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I was sent a picture when there was I don't know if it was league play out there.
Couple weekends ago?
A couple weekends ago, and my first
Some tar stuff
response
there?
was, it looks like a Seattle homeless encampment.
Yes, yes. And
It's
that was,
embarrassing.
And that was due to Larry. He did what he could with what
Right.
we asked.
Right.
We had to have something to cover them girls for the weekend.
No, I agree. It's just been 5 months, and I'm just curious as to
Yeah.
what you all are being told.
Nothing.
Okay.
All right. Thanks.
And give him some props. I know this guy a little bit, but.
Yeah.
I call him on the weekends. He's out there repairing dugouts at Marshall Park. He's doing everything he can to help girls.
Right, no, I get it, and it's
And
not,
I know
it's
you've
not,
been
it's
through
not
it.
it's not Scott County softball that's supposed to get things repaired.
But that's the thing. He's having to go
Right.
do it. So I don't know what's going on with parks. I think the discussion.
And it's
with
been,
parks
I'm
would
gonna
be,
tell you,
why are
it's
we
been
not
that
taking
way
care
for
of these fields?
17 years.
Well,
The bathrooms, the storage room, all built by Scott County Softball Club.
Yeah.
Just like out at baseball. Baseball has put up the scoreboards, the hitting facility, and taking care of all those things.
Well, I know we've made a pretty good relationship with Larry, who is the lead guy for the grounds. And he's been more than willing. I mean, he's come out and helped, but we told him is, hey, we don't want you to do it all. We want to help. And I think that's what's turning the relationship around with softball and Parks and Rec.
Judge, one quick question. Did I hear you right? Did you say you guys rent the fields, or did I misunderstand?
We do rent the fields out through our seasons. Travel teams come in. We do rent them.
Okay, so a lot of this issue is with travel teams.
Yes.
But our local kids get to play in
Oh, yes.
the season, and
Yes. Yes.
you don't have to rent?
No.
Because you're already paying for the fields, by the way, with tax dollars. I'm just.
In our eyes, league kids take first dibs.
Well, I agree with that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Parks agreement renewal. Same agreement, just being renewed. Any questions or comments?
Motion for approval.
Motion. Is there a second?
David.
David seconded. All right. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Sheriff Department surplus. There are 3 vehicles, 2 going to, help me, somebody, JR?
Harrison.
2 to Harrison, 1 to Lincoln. Any questions or comments? I'd much rather donate them to another agency than see them driving down the road with everything peeled off by some. We have a motion, second for Mr. Hostetler. Any questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Broyles is here with the detention center bid. Those bids references, there were 2 that were shared that were very positive. Any questions with any questions related to that bid for Mr. Broyles?
Real quick there, wasn't the last time we had an issue with the control being in West Virginia or someplace? Is that?
Yes.
Yeah. Is that?
Yeah, we had it was another vendor that we were using. We were having an issue.
We're going to go away from that issue, right?
Correct. Yeah, and this company actually is in just across the river in Indiana. But I got to tell you, we have used this particular company in the past. Actually, we've used it kind of on a regular basis the last couple of years as our control panel has deteriorated. Their response time is great. The work performance is great. I personally would give them a good recommendation as well.
And the amount of the bid was what?
129.
129,704.
So would anyone make a motion to approve that bid?
Yes.
Mr. Hostetler, second from Mr. Livingston. Any other questions or comments?
You do have faith in this company, correct? That's
Yes.
your answer.
Yes.
There
Yeah.
are
We-
multiple. There are multiple spelling. I mean, the very first
Right.
one, AFC has
I don't
provided.
disagree with that.
I mean,
Right.
there's multiple spelling mistakes. So
Still Kentucky.
yeah, I mean, just.
I agree
spell
with you.
check.
I agree with you. My experience, Mr. Pratt, has been extremely positive with this company.
I just started reading through
Thank
the
you.
quote and I was like,
Motion, second. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Moving special, in new business, special inspections agreement. And, I shared this. This is required by state statute, and it is, it takes into the scope of services inspection of fabrications, structural steel construction, concrete construction, masonry construction, soil construction, wind resistance elements, the tornado hardened shelter, seismic resistant elements, and fire resistant penetration of joints. It has to be done by a third party outside of the contract to build the structure. And
that's by KRS.
That's by KRS.
So it couldn't be in the bid.
Any questions or comments?
That was my only question. Why wasn't it in the bid?
Yeah, it has to be outside that. So the amount's $63,250 for thoroughbred. Would there be any other questions? Motion? Second. Any questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And then Lyle Road fence that I shared. There's evidence of young, well, I shouldn't say young, because common sense doesn't have to be lacking in only young people sometimes. But
Get off my lawn.
I can vouch for that.
stay off. What I'm proposing is either to build the guardrail type structure that we have at Great Crossing. We had a price there from glass fencing, and I appreciate JR and all his help on this. We had a price on that one of, I think it was like $32,000 and some change. $775. And then I just, for the sake of it, said, well, I'm going to call another vendor. For the sake of it, I did two things. I said, well, how much would four plank poplar cost as compared to the guardrail? And glass fencing provided a cost of $21,000 for 2,300 linear feet of that. I called Shuck Fencing. They said they could do that for $18,000, but they wouldn't be able to see us until the middle of November. So I really wanted feedback from you all, and I'll pass this down. This is a video or another picture JR got to me that kind of shows the four fields, and we'll pass it down. But I wanted feedback from you all whether you want a guardrail type. And one of the considerations is the guardrail type doesn't block view. It doesn't block view. But the other consideration is if you go four plank, that there's going to be more maintenance down the road.
Well, I was going to maybe ask for JR some input if he wanted to, because there's a significant difference in the price, but to get one board for a guardrail.
And here's why they're using a 2x10 and they're using square posts.
And poured concrete.
And poured concrete. And they have to lag it in to flatten it up on that guardrail. And that's just the way they did it.
And this is like what's out at Great Crossing.
That's what it's at Great Crossing.
Yeah.
The cost for that's $32,775 as compared.
Pretty much maintenance free too, the guardrail is.
Yeah. That was my question.
Would have to be painted periodically every 4 years.
There's some in there. There's already one of those wooden guardrail things out there, right, at Lyle Road?
Not where we're proposing.
Not where we're proposing, but there's already one out there. On the right, as you come in.
There's a four plank fence up on the top of the hill, kind of.
Decorative almost.
Well,
You're talking about the entrance.
No.
No.
Like as you go back through there.
Oh, closer to Lyle Road. I'm talking about right there on those four fields. And in my email I sent you yesterday, it showed you the path of the boundary of the fence.
And we were out there a week ago with somebody that done been up on there doing donuts on those fields, and we saw that.
We just want to go on and get something done.
Do you need a motion?
I wanted your feedback on whether you wanted a guardrail or you wanted a four plank.
I was always thinking about the four plank, but I didn't think about the maintenance, like JR said, you know.
Well, and the guardrail doesn't look bad. It looks good out at Great Crossing. So.
Plus, there's that sight variant.
Yeah.
You're going to see right over the guardrail.
Somebody want to make a motion?
I make a motion for the guardrail.
As presented in the glass?
Correct.
Is there a second? Second for Mr. Jones. Any other questions? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? At this time, I'd like to share that we do not need executive session, and I'd like to ask, for the spirit of getting to the groundbreaking, I'd like to ask everybody to move from here straight on out to the site at the sheriff's office if you can.
Can we
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Judge, got one thing. We got a very special birthday.
Very special birthday.
Happy birthday, JR.
Happy birthday,
We'll
JR.
sing to you out there at the sheriff's office.
Veto.
I have a motion. Is there a second? All those in favor, please say
Aye.
We're adjourned.